All right, thanks everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in. So in her foundational work, Heavy Metal, the Music and Its Culture, Dina Weinstein had recourse to ancient Greek theology in order to make sense of the metal ethos. Quote, "The major themes of heavy metal fall into two clusters defined by a binary opposition, Dionysian and chaotic. Dionysian experience celebrates the vital forces of life through various forms of ecstasy. It is embodied in the unholy trinity of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The Dionysian is juxtaposed to a strong emotional involvement in all that challenges the order and hegemony of everyday life, monsters, the underworld, and hell, the grotesque and horrifying, disasters, mayhem, carnage, injustice, death, and rebellion," end quote. Weinstein adapts the duality of Apollo and Dionysus, famously identified in ancient Greek music and its culture by Friedrich Nietzsche. The Apolline principle of rationality, order, and self-control was balanced by the opposite tendencies in Dionysian madness, transgression, and the liberation of primal instincts. Weinstein's formulation for metal music and its culture, on the other hand, replaces Apollo with chaos, which is not merely the principle of disorder. According to the Theogony, an 8th century epic on the origins of the gods and the cosmos by the Greek poet Hesiod, chaos was the first god, a cosmic void that precedes all order and definition. The Theogony itself is a genealogy of the Hellenic pantheon, as well as a history of how primordial chaos and the monstrous offspring of chaos's first child, Mother Earth, gave way to the patriarchal order of Zeus and the Olympians. As a virtual ditheism at the core of metal, chaos and Dionysus are not so much a binary opposition as they are a binity, whose two persons, Chaos and Dionysus, are of similar substance, homoiousios in Greek. If Dionysus is the transgression and liberation of established systems of conformity and control, Chaos is the original void which all order is based upon, and by the thermodynamic law of entropy, that to which all order tends to return. While both may be opposed to the order of Zeus and Apollo, even Zeus and Apollo are nevertheless their kin. As father and brother to Dionysus, Zeus and Apollo themselves exhibit power, violence, and sexual voraciousness. As you can now appreciate, Weinstein's reference to the Greek pantheon can especially resonate with classicists such as Aneirin and myself, all the more so because Aneirin is themselves a Hellenic polytheist, while I myself, as a veteran metalhead, have laid down my soul to the gods rock and roll. In this presentation, we combine our experience in order to explore how the affinities between Hellenic religion and the metal scene go well beyond academic analogies, or even the incorporation of lyrical themes. By examining the role of the Greek pantheon in metal music and its culture, we approach the question, if metal can be conceived of as a religion or a substitute for religion, might Hellenic polytheism be one that it closely resembles? When I teach classical mythology, the first thing I teach my students is that mythology and religion are not the same thing. The former is stories we tell involving the gods, the latter, the practices through which we interact with those gods. The two are nevertheless linked in complex ways that are not conclusively understood. In other words, the mythology might be the legomena, and the religion might be more the dromena, using Pausanias and Anna Katarina's terms. It is with a desire to better understand the link between mythology and religion that we approach the mountain of source material that constitutes metal music's incorporation of Greek mythology and theology into its lyrical, visual, and musical themes. We are talking thousands of songs by hundreds of bands in nearly every subgenre and country, representing a phenomenon that began in the 1980s with piecemeal tracks like Iron Maiden's Flight of Icarus and Anthrax's Medusa, and has since the early 2000s exploded exponentially into scores of concept albums and even bands devoted exclusively to Greek mythology and religion too. This trend is part of an even wider phenomenon of metal's reception of antiquity, with the histories and mythologies of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Rome also achieving increasing popularity. Over the past decade or so, a growing number of ancient historians and classicists have begun to critically analyze this vast body of material in scholarly journals, edited volumes, and conferences. The popularity of antiquity in metal has a number of interrelated explanations. Osman Umarhan notes the appeal of the themes of, quote, aggression, struggle for power, and masculinity, end quote, in common legendary and historical narratives from antiquity to the socially alienated youth that traditionally comprise the metal scene. Elena Gonzalez Vaquerizo sees antiquity's appeal as more wide-reaching by its resonance in dimensions of not only masculinity and empowerment, but also escapism, romanticism, and nationalism. Antiquity, in other words, is constructed as a fantasy where models of traditional masculinity, human or divine, inspire the listener, especially if they feel a continuity of culture and ancestry. As I myself have noted, ancient figures, male or female, are all the more charismatic if they are transgressive, using their unfettered power as license to defy and overthrow established codes of order. These prior studies have largely focused on metal's reception of human figures of history and legend, such as Achilles, Alexander, Caligula, and Messalina, the gods being incidental to their story. The reception of the gods themselves has mostly been overlooked, with the notable exception of Christodoulos Aperes's study of the Greek black metal band Kawir and their incorporation of hymns to the Hellenic gods as genuine devotees thereof. While Kawir are not the only devotional Hellenic polytheist band, and their use of metal as a devotional medium is of course relevant to our interests, our scope extends to the much wider reception of the gods in non-devotional bands, including those beyond Greece. We begin by noting the transgressive appeal of the Greek pantheon in its historical antagonism to Christianity and other modern monotheisms. While the process by which the diversity of Hellenic religious traditions gave way to Christianity in late antiquity is, like any historical development, highly complex and nuanced, most metal bands tend to reduce it to a narrative of mass persecution and eradication by Christianized empires and kingdoms, beginning with the Roman Emperor Constantine. Animal sacrifice was banned, temples demolished, philosophers like Hypatia martyred, and the old gods demoted to the status of evil demons and even syncretized with Satan himself. The 1997 track Ancient Pride, the most popular song by the highly influential Greek black metal band Necromantia, may serve as a locus classicus of metal's transgressive nostalgia for ancient traditions as a vehicle of resentment against contemporary religious order. Quote, "You came and slaughtered Odin. You came and murdered Zeus. Our gods became your Satan, and Satan became our God," end quote. Unlike their countrymen Kawir, Necromantia are not Hellenic polytheists. Rather, their lyrics focus on the satanic and blasphemous themes typical of black metal, which the band justifies by positively embracing the very demonization to which Christianity has historically subjected ancient pagan pantheons. This historical phenomenon of equating Hellenic and satanic theology is especially apparent in the Christian appropriation of the Greco-Roman underworld, culminating in the Inferno of the medieval poet Dante. The chthonic divinities of ancient Greece, especially the god Hades and his queen Persephone, are not inherently evil, but they are made evil through a Christianizing lens. As a result, they are among the most popular Hellenic gods in metal due to their seamless syncretism and typological equivalence with both Satan and his feminine consorts in the guise of witches and other femme fatales like Elizabeth Bathory. By embracing the demonization of the old gods, Necromantia anticipate a more general appropriation of the Olympian pantheon as agents of chaos and transgression against contemporary religious and social orders. The flirtation with fascist slogans and imagery here also points in the directions several right-wing and National Socialist black metal bands would take this theme, who associate the vengeful return of the old gods with the purgation of European culture of all foreign elements, seeing Abrahamic religions as contaminators of race and culture. Most bands who engage in classical reception tend to avoid outright political messaging, preferring to emphasize the appeal of the Olympian gods' anthropomorphism, That is, their ability to take on idealized human embodiment, while also being subject to all too human passions of pride, lust, and wrath. Therefore, the gods that most famously exhibit brute strength, power, and violence, such as the thunder god Zeus, the sea god Poseidon, and Ares, the berserker god of war, achieve more prominence in metal than gods or goddesses who, such as Apollo or Athena, symbolize rationality and intellect. Indeed, Apollo and Athena were two of the most important gods in ancient Sparta, as moral discipline and strategic thinking were essential to success in warfare. In the hundreds of metal songs devoted to the Spartans that I have studied, however, they are virtually absent. They are replaced by Ares, who is a representative of bestial bloodlust and brute force as the key to victory. For instance, in the opening track to the German heavy metal band Sacred Gates record Tides of War, what I have found to be the most historically accurate concept album on the Battle of Thermopylae, it features the immortal one, Ares, delivering a first-person prologue. Quote, "I have come to set the earth on fire. I bring devastation and destruction. Armies will clash and men will be slaughtered. Once again, Hades' gates shall open," end quote. This son of Zeus is glorified as an agent of chaos and hell. Another illustrative example is the depiction of the sea god Poseidon by the Greek heavy metal band Wrathblade for their album God of the Deep Unleashed. Poseidon's hyper-masculine body is akin to the muscle-bound warriors on albums by Manowar or Eternal Champion. His glowing eyes demonstrate his transformation into a demonic and even chthonic god, rising from the depths to unleash chaos upon those who neglected his worship. The most popular of the 12 Olympians in metal music, however, not counting his brother Hades, is Zeus himself. This may partly be explained by his similarity to the Norse thunder god Thor, as we saw with Nephromantia. One of his most popular myths is his victorious battle with the Titans, as well as with Typhon, or Typhoeus, the fire-breathing Dracontian spawn of Mother Earth, who is the final and most formidable challenge, the final boss, if you will, to Zeus's conquest of the cosmos. It was a victory achieved not by cunning, but by sheer power and will. Yet Zeus's enthronement as king of the gods is also the limit of his appeal in metal, as at that point he becomes an analog for the tyranny of modern religion. For it is really the titan Prometheus who, in defiance of Zeus, stole fire for the benefit of humankind, who is heavy metal's most celebrated god, precisely as an analog to Satan, who rebelled from God and let humanity taste of the tree of knowledge. Even Zeus's triumph over Typhon is being rewritten, as in the case of the British black and thrash metal band Craven Idol, whose latest album, Forked Tongues, reimagines the myth as a victory for Typhon and the forces of chaos over the tyranny of Zeus, and by extension, all religious codes. So that is my half of the presentation, and I now give the floor to my friend and colleague, Aneirin.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't. Okay, perfect. So, like Jeremy, I'm going to jump right in. So, we're going to go a little overview about Hellenic Polytheism today first. Hellenic Polytheism today is an intricate system of beliefs that may vary with each practitioner. Although it is difficult to categorize and generalize such a religion with a wide array of followers, I have separated contemporary practitioners into three main overarching groups: Reconstructionists, Revivalists, and Eclectic worshippers. Each of these categories may overlap, but for our purposes, I have defined them as the following. Reconstructionists seek to rebuild the ancient Greek religion as accurately to historic practice as possible, often using a time frame or geographic location as their criteria. Revivalists, however, are more flexible in their worship and will adapt to the contemporary world in a way that makes sense to them. Eclectic worshippers may practice ancient Greek religion in some aspects while incorporating other religions or religious essences into their worship. These categories, particularly the latter two, can be relevant in terms of where the metal bands fall in relation to how they incorporate the Greek gods into their music. My previous research finds that many contemporary Hellenic polytheists tend to gravitate more towards the flexible categories of the religion that I just mentioned. As there is no one authority over the religion as a whole, there are no holy books or scripture or popes of the Hellenic polytheistic community to dictate how the religion should be followed, many contemporary practitioners approach worship with the notion of pliability. There are suggestive readings for contemporary practitioners, which include the Theogony, but no one main book that outlines codes to follow. The idea that there is no set authority and the rules may be viewed as loose guidelines rather than strict adherence to law coincides well with the culture of metal music. The aspect of no core authority to outline how one should behave may be part of why there is an appeal to the Hellenic deities. It complements the anti-authoritarian themes in present metal. Overall, I would argue that metal itself can be seen as religion. During performances at metal shows, the band takes the stage in front of a large congregation of people who are brought together with similar beliefs to listen to the band's message. The energy emitted by the audience in response to the music can be seen as an erotic or a chthonic offering, as it carries into the air or into the ground through movement of the feet, and perhaps to the gods being addressed in the set. The stage is the altar, and the band is the priests. Their songs a message to the congregation, addressing or calling on deities to hear their pleas. Presenting it in this manner is similar to what I worship as a Hellenic polytheist. Since I have never actually attended a metal show myself, I did ask Jeremy for examples of possible correlations to sacrifice that may appear during performance. This particular aspect I did not relate to as a Hellenic polytheist, as I do not personally participate in animal sacrifice for religious purposes. I would describe what I do as a more Chrissy Jacksonified sacrifice, where I burn the fatty parts of meat I've already prepared for myself as a meal. From what I've learned, the sacrificial animals or symbols on stage are for the purpose of symbol or transgression, whereas in the ancient Greek religion, the sacrifice would be prepared to share with the entire congregation, as the fattiest part of the animal was burned for the gods, and then the rest was eaten by the congregation. The most distinct variation between metal shows and Hellenic polytheistic practice is that public worship took place outside, whereas private worship occurred individually within the family home. To give more context to public versus private worship, when contemporary Greek polytheists gather publicly in a large congregation, there is more adherence to how large festivals would have been celebrated in the ancient world. There may be processions, singing, participation in other forms of merriment, and of course offerings to the gods. This would be done outside, out in the open, sometimes on someone's land, or at a public place that was rented out for the event, such as a park or a campground. The essence of this type of celebration would still be present at a metal show, but may not be performed outdoors as a public ritual or festival would. Private worship for contemporary Hellenic polytheists varies greatly, but many of them often pray or call upon gods outside of the Greek pantheon in order to assist family or friends when asked. My personal experience with private worship has been the same. I have worked not only with the Greek pantheon and deities that would have been worshipped in Greek settlements, but I've called upon Norse deities, Slavic deities, saints, and have done angel work with other individuals close to me who wanted me to participate with them in their worship. Due to the fact that Hellenic polytheism is no longer a family religion, close friends have replaced the family unit for personal worship inside the home. The private versus public worship relates to metal music in a way that creating the music, practicing it, recording it before sharing the songs by the band, and the fans of the band buying the albums to download and listen to and experience at home would be the types of private worship. These experiences would, of course, culminate in public worship, in other words, the metal show or concert. As with categories of Hellenic polytheism, as I analyzed the myriad of songs that mention the Greek gods, I found that both devotional bands and non-devotional bands approach the way they address and interact with the gods via music in different ways. Jeremy mentioned that he taught his students that mythology and religion were not the same. This is still true to Hellenic polytheists as well. Contemporary practitioners, much of the time, feel that the difference is myth is written by man, but the form of worship of the gods were more accurate to how they existed as divine beings rather than subjects of the story. The reimagining of certain myths, rather than telling them through the medium of metal music, could be a devotional act, even if the act is in defiance of the god. This may be the dichotomy that is present in devotional bands versus non-devotional bands. The devotional bands continue to worship the gods through music in a way that honors them, whereas non-devotional bands are using the gods more as a symbol or stand-in for the attributes they find desirable and want to emulate. I explored the lyrics of songs that contain themes pertaining to the most popular gods of metal, like Jeremy said, Zeus, Prometheus, and Ares. Zeus, as the king of the gods, is held in highest regard by contemporary polytheists, and not a god you would want to anger. These gods are multifaceted, but I find in metal music they become more one-dimensional and only represent the aspect of their being that fits within the message or of the song or the band as a whole. Often, many of these gods are conflated or syncretized with other gods, such as Norse gods or the Christian saint. The act of syncretizing the Greek gods with religious figures that would not have been present during the height of their worship place heavy metal music in the categories of either revivalists or eclectic worshippers. The appeal of the Greek pantheon in its antagonism to Christianity is true both with heavy metal and contemporary Hellenic polytheist communities, as many of us exist within a Christianized society. I myself often identify as culturally Catholic, even though it has been over 20 years since I consider myself Catholic, because it is how I grew up, and whether I wanted it to be part of me or not, it was ingrained in me as part of my culture. Hellenic polytheist groups often have to fight for multiple years for their religion to be officially recognized by their countries in order for them to have the same religious rights to worship or have certain life stage celebrations, such as marriage, legally recognized. The inability to avoid Christianity.
I'm sorry, but please get to the conclusion. You are out of time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I was writing you their messages that.
Okay. So the gods feature prominently much of the corpus of heavy metal music, with bands dedicating their entire works to the gods themselves as a devotional band. Whether the band is devotional or not, the gods as an ongoing and recurring theme demands that there be further study of their presence within metal music. There was so much material for me to examine, I had to put everything in a more generalized sphere, and I hope to see more research in this area and hope to do more on this myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy and Aneirin.